little caffeine in the weekend.
Do you have any plans for the weekend already?
I do have a busy weekend. Saturday, I'm just trying to remember. Just happening one day at a time. Saturday I'm going to be up at the YMCA in Manitowoc handing out bike helmets to kids. Then I have a banquet at night where I'm winning an award. Saturday.
So anything that is not work related? Anything that, you know, leisure?
Yeah, hopefully the weather's nice so I can go out for a bike ride or a run.
We're actually bikers too.
Yeah.
He's not, but the two of us are.
Okay.
So, hoping to get out.
Kind of bikes you have?
I have a Canon, or a Cannondale,
Okay.
and
I
you
have
have
a giant
truck, right?
TCR.
Oh,
There you go.
Yeah.
so,
And you run long distance, right?
Yep. I do try it.
Are you going to be running any events soon?
My first one is the Elkhart Lake Try in June.
Is it Olympic triathlon?
That's the Olympic distance, and I'm doing 2 halves, and then the full Ironman
cool.
in September.
So I suppose that you have done an Ironman already, right?
Yeah, the last 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
What is your time right now?
The best of the two times was 2 years ago. It was 12 and a half hours.
Are you
12:28.
Are you planning to?
Then last year, when I was campaigning, I stopped exercising. And it took me 15 hours. It was horrible. It was horrible. But you have to sign up almost a year in advance because I fell out and didn't know I was going to be campaigning last year. So it sort of got in the way of working out. But so I'm going to break 12 hours this year. That's my goal.
So that's your plan.
That's my goal. Break 12
So
hours.
you have trained, you're motivated, your mind is ready.
I actually gained weight during the campaign.
Uh-huh.
Most people lose weight because they, start walking, knocking on doors, and I stopped exercising.
Wow.
I kept eating like I was working out like an Ironman. So I actually gained 15 pounds during the camp, so I'm working on getting rid of that again, getting back into shape a little bit.
So 12 hours. That's. So what is the part that you have more difficulties with?
Swimming.
Swimming.
If you didn't grow up on the swim team, it's the most technical because there's a lot of drag in the water.
Sure.
A lot of things can go wrong. It's the most technical, and I still haven't quite developed that easy, fluent.
Have you tried total immersion?
I have not.
I started training total immersion and fantastic. I mean, I swim 10 times better. Super with very little drag.
You swim, Senor?
Yes. But so I don't. Should we start, gentlemen? I mean, is that all right?
So you're not going to ask me about working out? Are you tired over here?
No, we're expecting.
That's what we want to know about our alumni. Are they in shape?
There you are. Well, I mean, actually, we can. Have you seen House of Cards?
I have not.
You have
I
not.
heard I need to watch that though.
You need to watch it. I mean, we were wondering how close to reality House of Cards
He's
is.
talking about this in the car.
Yeah.
So where do you guys, on the north side, Sheboygan? Or?
Yep, I'm on the north side.
I'm on the south side, right on Lake Shore. So,
I'm from Oostburg.
Excellent.
Maybe we'll give your representative a call, who's not Terry Kosmafield on the north side. Your representative is here today, so maybe we'll get him over here.
we were wondering if he was.
Yeah. Is Governor Walker here today?
I have no idea. I haven't seen him in a couple weeks ago. I had a personal meeting with him, and then he signed my first bill into law that day. So I got to meet him then, and then he spoke to the Senate. And then I saw him so I saw him 4 times in one day, and that was the first time I'd seen him in like 2 months. And I haven't seen him since, so I think that's what he does. When he's here, he's very busy, he gets a lot of things done. He does a lot of traveling besides that.
Nice. Which, by the way, what committee? Was it a bill coming out of any of the committees that you're a member of?
No, it went through a different committee. It was a bill to simplify and reform raffle law for charities and nonprofits who run raffles. The bill hadn't been updated, or the law around raffles hadn't been updated in like 25, 30 years. So there's a bunch of rules made around it that it was very hard for these groups to operate their raffles within the law. So my predecessor, Joe Leibum, Senator Leibum, had worked on the bill last session, and it passed, and the governor actually vetoed it last session because there was some language in there that might have conflicted with the Indian casino compacts.
Okay.
So I helped rewrite it just to make sure that those concerns were addressed. So,
Cool.
so yeah, let's see, I actually won an award for it already. My first law by the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation. There's all these conservation groups, sporting groups, not Rotary clubs. They all raise their money through raffles, and that's a big part of the fundraising. And they all had just a horrible time navigating the law, and so.
Very cool. So that is actually one of the topics that we wanted to talk about, your involvement with nonprofits and how to alleviate the weight of the state. But we'll talk about that in just 1 second. Jonathan, whatever you want. I mean,
You want to start or chat?
so a little bit of which topic should be addressed first?
I have several here.
Okay,
Want to start?
you can start.
Okay. My first question, my dad actually asked me to ask this because my grandfather was on the county board of Sheboygan. So how do you deal with issues or votes in the Senate when your Christian views conflict with the views of, let's say, your party or your constituents?
It's a great question. Fortunately, I haven't had to do that yet. I think I would like to hear an example of how that would not mesh, because I think coming off the bat with a tough question right away. No, I think it's obviously you need to live your faith in your life, and I haven't been put in that situation yet. I know someone asked me a similar question once, is, how do you vote for something that doesn't have 100% of what you agree with? For example, the budget. When we pass a budget, it's thousands of pages long, and there might be 10-20% of it in there that I don't think is maybe the best, but how do you weigh the 80-90% good against the 10-20% bad? At some point you need to say, well, this is, for the most part, going to be good for the state, good for education, good for the economy as a whole. But I don't envision any votes that I'm going to need to take, at least in the near future, that compromise my faith or my religious beliefs, that the party would be forcing me to take, at least.
Is there a strict party influence in the vote of each senator or assemblyman, or are you guys a little bit on your own? You have freedom to decide whatever you think is right.
Well, obviously, we do have to decide, but there will be pressure in some circumstances to go along. It's sort of an interesting dynamic with us in the Senate. And granted, I've only been here for 3 months, so we haven't taken up too many controversial things, because most of the stuff that we pass, like raffle reform, every senator voted for it because it's common sense. And a lot of stuff we do is, all of the constituents say, can you please work on this? And once you explain it to everybody, it seems like a common sense solution. Let's get it done. But where am I going with this? Oh.
The influence of the party.
Right. So I think we have more of an opportunity being with only 33 members in the Senate, whereas there's 99 in the Assembly. Whereas if we see something coming down the pipeline that we might not necessarily agree with, either get it changed or amended to address the concerns that we might have, or, there have been some things that have been sort of stopped in the committee process. If there's enough resistance by 1 or 2 senators who say, no, we really can't do that, an example is my speed limit bill. I'm the lead author of the speed limit bill to raise the speed limit on interstates and 4-lane highways to 70 miles an hour. As you can see, Wisconsin's an outlier, only at 65. And the chairman of the transportation committee was holding up my bill because he didn't necessarily agree with raising speed limits. And so he was just sitting on it in his committee for a while. And so I went with him and we worked out a compromise. So now 4-lane expressways that have at-grade crossings, essentially driveways and roads butting up to it, are not going to be eligible to be 70 miles an hour. So he had some safety concerns, so we worked out a compromise. Am I happy with that compromise? No, because I like to drive 70 miles an hour or more. But
So when you were voting, when you were deciding on bills, are you what is your thinking process in terms of your constituents? Are you thinking about the whole constituent body, or are you thinking about what the people that might vote for you might want?
yeah, I don't think it's necessarily either of those. When I campaigned and ran, I ran as someone who's going to be, pro-business, less taxes, less government regulation, pro-life legislator. So I'm not necessarily saying what does 70% or the majority of the voters think about this. This is what I ran on, this is what I believe in, so this is what I'm going to do as a legislator. And hopefully the people who saw my campaign and said, well, this is what this guy stands for, so we're going to vote for him. If I decide to run in 4 years again for election, hopefully they'll look at my whole body of what I voted for or what I've been trying to champion and say, not the one vote that they may disagree with,
Sure.
and say, well, this guy he is a pro-life legislator, he is a pro-business legislator, he does want to get government out of our lives and make us ultimately responsible.
Do you think that leaving apart topics that like abortion or something like that, is there a lot? Have you noticed a lot of common sense among the legislators?
I think there is. I know the last session, over 90% of legislation passed had bipartisan support. In fact, wide support. But obviously, the media, and now that we have social media and all kinds of different media.
Sure.
Obviously, it's interesting to write stories on controversial issues, which is what people are going to read about, the protests or, things like that. So I think, and there is, at least in Wisconsin, there is maybe a little bit of heightened controversy in the state over the last 3-4 years, but for the most part, on a day-to-day, and I realize this being a locally elected official, when you're on the county board or village board, you're not held by the partisan politics, but everybody, we have 25 county board supervisors, so we all sort of know what party each of us vote for, but when we're in a room trying to find a solution to whatever is affecting the county, you work together to find a solution to get it done. If this needs to get done, you may not always agree 100% on what you're doing, but you try to find that compromise where everybody can get on board behind it, or most people. So but down in here, I haven't had a chance to work with too many of the Democrats yet, but the other side, but from right now, I was meeting about getting an assembly lead on a bill that I'm working on, but I have a co-sponsor in the Senate who's a Democrat, because she's worked on issues similar to that before, so I went over and talked to her. It was an issue that a constituent brought, one of my constituents brought, that they were interested in changing the law, and I know actually the Democrats' office is right next to mine, and I know she's worked on issues similar to that in the past, so we went and approached her and said, this is what we're thinking of doing. We know you've worked in this area, so let us know what you think about changing the law this way. She said, oh, that's a great idea. So she's going to be on the bill, and so I mean, when it comes to the controversial issues, I think both sides sort of like to grandstand from time to time, which is maybe unfortunate, but I think for the most part, when it comes down, and that'll happen with the budget too, but it's sort of an interesting dynamic anyways with our governor sort of running for president, which adds a new variable into all of our debates here, so.
You haven't been in office long, but you're already on the committee for agriculture, small business, and tourism. So in this committee, how are you trying to grow small business in Wisconsin, or even specifically Sheboygan County?
Right. That committee is the only one that I got put on that I requested. And then they tried to pull me off it last week because we just had a new senator elected to fill Senator Grothman's seat just south of ours because he was elected to Congress. So they had a special election. So they tried to pull me off of the one committee that I actually tried to be on. But it's interesting at this point that for the first 3 months, we've mostly been working through budget issues with the governor proposing the budget right away. So that committee has only met once so far, and that was just because the Senate has to approve all of the governor's appointments to the different secretary positions, like the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Tourism. So the only time that committee has actually met 3 months in was to approve the governor's appointments to the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Tourism. So we haven't actually had a lot of work done in that committee yet, but I'm really looking forward to that, doing work in that committee, especially with agriculture being a huge part of our area of the state, and tourism being all of our Illinois drivers driving up in the summer, going through Sheboygan County, Manitowoc County, up to York County, so, and small business, which is the backbone driving the economy of the state, essentially. In Sheboygan County, we're fortunate to have Acuity and Kohler and Ball, some great large companies that are helping anchor our economy, but it's the small businesses that keep the economy moving and thriving, so.
In relation to that, we were considering how are you, what are your plans or ideas to protect small businesses from the competition of bigger businesses? What is your plan?
I think the challenge is to, especially on the federal level, but even on the state level, a lot of laws are on the books that make it tough for competition for smaller businesses. And they're often lobbied by the big business groups who put those laws into place. An example right now that we're grappling with is prevailing wage, which essentially sets the wage for public projects, what needs to be paid for, electrical work, carpentry work, when you're building a new school or a new government building or paving the roads. And that was, the law essentially makes it really tough for small businesses to put bids in just because of the paperwork involved. You need a lot of overhead because the wage is set, but if you're a small company, you don't have all the overhead that you can, handle the accounting work and everything like that. So I know like a lot of companies down in our smaller, like Usper Concrete is a small company. They don't even bid on prevailing wage projects because it's such a pain to go through all the paperwork and things like that. So I signed on to the bill to repeal prevailing wage, and I think that would help out. I talked to a trucking company who they don't bid on it. It's just simply on prevailing wage jobs because first of all, it's not good for their staff because then half their staff gets paid a higher wage and half their staff is getting paid a lower wage, and the paperwork involved in the reporting and just all those extra levels of government make it tough to do. So it's things like that, which just getting government out of the way and letting the small businesses compete with it, which they can do if there's not a bunch of red tape surrounding it.
Do you think that at this point, for example, in terms of bigger companies, do you have any hand or do you try to facilitate that Wisconsin in general, not only Sheboygan County, is more attractive for bigger companies. I mean, we were thinking about the case of Thomas Industries in our county, and that we lost it to another state, I don't know if it was UC. And so how can we be competitive in comparison with other states? What is your plan to be attractive?
Right. Well, we did pass right to work about a month ago, which was one of the reasons why Thomas left, is because they were having a challenge with their union negotiations. The union won. So I think that's, at least for companies expanding in Wisconsin or possibly thinking about moving some of the bigger companies, that is a crucial factor. But in all reality, we do have a lot of great things going for us in Wisconsin. A great education system, very hardworking people who live here, good roots. But the main problem right now is we're still one of the top 10 tax states for new companies moving into Wisconsin. We still have some of the highest income taxes, personal income taxes at the top level. And if you're an executive, why would you want your headquarters here if you're going to be paying the highest state income taxes? All around property taxes are still in the top 10%. So it's tough to do because, I mean, there's a lot of variables that go into why we are taxed the way we are. But we need to keep moving in that direction, making sure that that's not an impediment. I mean, we also have the disadvantage of our winters here in Wisconsin. I mean, we have a lot of great things in Wisconsin, like if you go up north, it's beautiful up there.
Sure.
But if you don't like winter, it's only beautiful 5 months a year up there. So, you know, and so there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages. Not having a home airline in Milwaukee anymore sort of hurts us a little bit because there's not a lot of direct flights going. I mean, there are to some of the bigger cities, but not as many as there were when we had Midwest Express as a home base in Milwaukee, so things like that, which would make, you know, Minneapolis a little more attractive because they have Northwest as a hub there. So all those things sort of add up, but I think we're moving in the right direction in Wisconsin. You know, the thing is, right now we have, I think there's 80,000 jobs on the Wisconsin job website, and I talked to a lot of, one of the great things about being in this position is you get to go around and meet business owners and tour businesses. Fascinating. You get to have toured, you know, Acuity, Valra, Scana up in Manitowoc. They take aluminum, melt it down, or smelt it, or whatever that process is, then roll it back out with these big blast furnaces, and just great. I mean, just fascinating. But I talked to a lot of businesses, and they're saying, you know, especially more in the manufacturing area, which is good paying jobs for people who want to go work. They're just having a hard time finding people who actually want to come in and work every day. Your generation who can come in and work and pass a drug test, and so if you guys are well educated and go out and work hard, I think there's a lot of opportunity out there right now.
You've been an advocate of taking Wisconsin off of the Common Core standard, correct?
Yes.
So what do you think are the problems with Common Core, and then what do you think Wisconsin should replace it with?
Right. I think there's a few issues with Common Core. My biggest the two major concerns I have is first is the ties to the federal government, controlling curriculum and education. I realize Common Core itself is only a set of standards, but it's being tied now with results on tests to race to the top funding. I don't think Washington or even Madison sometimes should be telling local schools what they need to be doing to teach their kids. But the other thing is, it's so test intensive. And like a lot of standards, you're essentially teaching to the test. It requires that you spend a lot of time just preparing kids to be able to pass a test, when that's not necessarily what is the best use of classroom time. And it's so involved, and it's an expense to the school and very time consuming. think it's the best way to accomplish things. There's some good things about it. I mean, it's good to have tough standards. I sort of like the ACT and the Aspire ones, because that's a little less intensive. But I think schools should have that. So if the school district wants to use Common Core, go for it. You're the experts in the field, but I don't think it should be required. And we certainly need to make sure that there's not strings attached from, I mean, we see that with all kinds of federal funding in other areas with Medicaid. You know, if you're going to take Medicaid funding, you need to provide it to all these groups. You can't do this with it or this with it. And we've seen that with transportation funding. If you're going to take transportation funding from the federal government for interstate highways, you need to pass seatbelt laws. You need to raise the drinking age. I'm not saying those are not good things, but it should be, I believe it should be the states who decide a lot of those things. And in regards to education, it should be the local level, because you know, Milwaukee's different than Sheboygan, which is different than Oostburg, which is different than La Crosse.
Now, one for a teacher, I mean, testing or just a little bit more the assessing the student is something useful. It let us know where we're at with each student. What is the problem with the type of testing that is mandatory or that it comes associated with the Common Core? Why assessing the student is pernicious, I should say. Why do you think that is?
I just hear from teachers all the time that instead of teaching kids how to learn, or they're teaching just to a test to get certain results, and they spend a lot of their time working on that rather than teaching them what they should be learning.
So it's a super high stakes assessment.
Right.
Sounds great.
Another kind of education-related question is, President Obama has gone, I think it was a State of the Union address, and said that he wanted to make technical colleges free to attend. So where would your job come in on the state level? Would that be, because as of now, the technical colleges are on the state level funded, I believe, so how would that exactly work with on the federal level, making them free?
Nothing's ever free.
Yeah.
Someone's always paying for it. Just a matter of who's paying for it. Right now, our technical colleges in Wisconsin, they're set up districts, and it gets put on the property tax bill. So, but then there's obviously tuition charge too. So what's charged on the property tax bill is the difference between the tuition costs and the cost of running the technical college. That would be a huge burden. I don't know if the federal government did say we'd have to. We have first of all, LTC is a very good technical college in our area, and in Wisconsin we have a pretty good network of technical colleges. Anytime the federal government starts putting band-aids on something and saying it has to be free, I think that just is a recipe for disaster right now. I think it's, plus for secondary education, any type of post-high graduation, I think it's good to have, for the students to have a little skin in the game, have a little incentive to actually show up and apply yourself. If you're getting something free, what value does it place in it? It's sort of like, I mean, if you look at people who rent or own a home, there's obviously a huge difference between how they treat their rental, because it's not something they own, but it's sort of the same thing with your education. If you get a free whack at a technical college education, how much priority are you going to give it?
That's an excellent point. I actually have a scholarship with Lakeland for 4 years for full tuition.
Fantastic.
So,
I toured there too about a month ago. Seems like a great college.
There have been a lot of conflicts between citizens and police officers lately in the state and the national level. So, do you think this is something where government should step in and have higher standards, or should pressure individual police departments departments to have better standards or regulations, or do you think this is not really an issue regarding regulations?
I think the controversies over police have been really unfortunate. Having worked with police on the county level and known a lot of officers, it's really unfortunate the way a lot of communities are viewing police officers right now. As in all fields, obviously there could be someone not doing their job the best, but for the most part, probably 99% of police officers get into the field because they're so committed to providing safety and protecting the weak and the vulnerable. So I think we need to stand up and show support for our police officers right now. Most of the cases that have made national or state news, at the end of the day, the officer was doing his job correctly, except for the one video where the guy mowed the guy down from behind. That didn't obviously help things out. But like in every field, there's going to be bad actors, so it's really unfortunate, I think.
And then my final question is just, how has Christian education impacted your life and career?
I think Christian education is, and I went through college, all Christian education. It provides a foundation for how you're living your life. Just the experiences you had, the friends you have, what you learned through it all, sort of is doing what's right, doing what's biblical, ingrained in you is so important. It just becomes sort of second nature at some point. Anything more specific about that?
I guess just the importance of it.
Yeah. No, I think we're fortunate to live in an area where we do have great public schools in Sheboygan County, but I just think just having that faith-based background is so important to let you know that your decisions that your faith does need to be part of every decision that you make in life. So I thought it was very valuable and very important.
Now, coming back for a second to the topic of the relationship between the police department or police departments around the county or around the state and the community, how do you think that we should move on from this point on? Obviously, there is a damage in that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
How can we close that gap between our community, our citizens, and the people that are protecting us, and we see as perhaps doing their job or even tyrannical? Or how do you think we should close that gap?
I think it's a tough situation. I think we need leaders, political leaders above me, maybe in cities or police chiefs, mayors, governors, backing the police. I don't think that's always been the case. And a president as well, who stands up for police, and rather than sort of questioning the motive sometimes or decisions, which is very counterproductive, which leads to a lot of the uprising. That's good. I mean, we've seen crime spiking in Milwaukee early this spring, and even in Madison. There was a couple of shootings already last week, which is not the usual here in Madison. So I think it just has an adverse effect when people start losing respect for authority. So I don't think me saying something would be very beneficial in Sheboygan County or Manitowoc County, but if different mayors and governors and presidents would, it's a messaging point, but it's also just society as a whole needs to find that respect for.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
By the way, are we running out of time?
I think I have another 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, that's good. I don't have as many
Yeah,
as
we
you
got it
guys.
budgeted for another 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've kind of talked about your influence and your plans for what you wanted to do here. Is there anything specific that you want to kind of influence the Senate to do in the Capitol?
You know, at this point, I think the big thing we need to work on overall is trying to change the mindset of society. We've there's sort of a generation of dependency in some areas of the state where there's a learned pattern of being on welfare and getting food stamps and not going out and working. Just even people on disability has been spiking nationwide and in the state of Wisconsin. So I think we need to try to change that mindset, which is tough to do when it's to learn when you've come from 3 generations of a single parent and you've been living on welfare that whole time, and you don't know that there's a better option, that you can go out and work and earn a living and live a fulfilling life, have a relationship with them. I don't know what the stats are, but if you have a child out of wedlock, you're like 15 times more likely to end up on welfare programs, whereas if you have that child in a marriage. So we need, granted you can't legislate a lot of this, but if you're pointing out the stats, not incentivizing people to not get married and be on all these different programs. So I think that's the cultural shift of working hard. It needs to be ingrained in people.
Okay, and then I think this is going to be my last one. We've already kind of talked about some education one, but one more since we're from the school and it's kind of important to this. What is your opinion on Governor Walker's plan for the voucher program? And then just if you support it, why or why not?
Right. I was glad to see that he sort of lifted the caps on. I support school choice. I think the best way to make schools accountable and improve schools is to add a little competition in there. So I support that. I was happy to see that he lifted the caps, but I don't think his current plan is necessarily the best way to do it. And I've heard from a lot of constituents that a couple of the